What's up, guys? Welcome to another playoff matchup. This time, we're going to be talking about the second round of the 2025 Stanley Cup Playoffs. So, yes, these were the two teams that were expected to win their matchups, and they deserved to advance to the second round. I know it pains us to see the Montreal Canadiens out in the first round, only forcing an extra game. So they played 5 games. Washington won the series 4-1. But Montreal showed a lot of promise as one of the youngest teams to ever make the playoffs, or the youngest team to ever make the playoffs, and really gave Washington a run for their money. I know the score doesn't dictate, um, how close the game was, but a lot of those goals were empty net goals for Washington. And, I have to give credit to Washington. They had the advantage in terms of size, aggressiveness, and experience and goaltending because unfortunately Sam Montembeault pulled his groin and Jacob Dobish, their rookie backup goalie, came in and did the best he could have done. But the team was not constructed for the playoffs. They weren't even supposed to be in the playoffs. So the fact that they made the playoffs and they did as well as they did, a lot of analysts across the board, Sportsnet, TNT, RDS, many outlets on Twitter, uh, gave a lot of praise to Marty St. Louis and his coaching staff for what they did with the Montreal Canadiens. A lot of players stepped up this year at different times in the year. And, as Habs fans, the future is bright, and we shouldn't be disappointed that they lost in 5 games. It was expected that, we weren't going to go too deep into the playoffs. So, at least they got a win, and their young players got progress in terms of what it takes to win. Essentially, got to play meaningful games, and it's good for their development. So that's all I have to say about the Habs. But in terms of Washington, Logan Thompson was their MVP in round one, literally stealing almost every single game except for the game that they lost to the Habs, and he got hurt that game, but returned the game after that, which I was surprised because it looked like he couldn't put weight on one of his legs, and he looked like he was also concussed because Dylan Strome ran into him after Slavkovsky had scored. But yeah, Logan Thompson continued to dominate like he did in the first half, or for the majority of the 2024-2025 season. I know after Four Nations, goaltending for Washington, both on Charlie Lindgren's side and Logan Thompson's side, wasn't great. Logan Thompson did get injured, didn't play the rest of the season, came back for the playoffs and did what he did. Dylan Strome, Ovechkin, always contributing to the score sheet. They had Anthony Beauvillier on their line, and he did very well complimenting both those players, and he got quite a few points. Duhaime as well in the bottom six contributed. Um, they got goals from Chikrin as well on their back end. But John Carlson didn't have the best playoff series, so I'm expecting him to step up his game in the second round versus Carolina. Also, Pierre-Luc Dubois was pretty much invisible, so I'm expecting him to have a better round versus the Carolina Hurricanes. But Tom Wilson, asserting his dominance on the Montreal Canadiens, on Josh Anderson, really give them a hard time. Injured Alexandre Carrier as well on a very big hit in game 4. So, Washington is a team that has all the right pieces, but like I said in the first, based off what I've seen in the first round versus the Habs, if a rookie team in the Montreal Canadiens is giving the Capitals somewhat of a hard time in your first seed in the East, it's a little bit questionable. I'm starting to not believe as much when seeing teams like Toronto do very well in the first round versus Ottawa, and Carolina completely dominating, obviously, a depleted New Jersey team with the injuries to Luke Hughes and Jack Hughes. But I think Washington's a very beatable team, and I don't know what your thoughts are, Luca, in terms of what you saw from both teams in the first round.
Yeah, well, I mean, first with Carolina, I mean, listen, we know what Carolina's capable of. I mean, this is a team that's built for the playoffs, right? They made some really good acquisitions in the offseason. Trade the trade deadline. Bringing in Taylor Hall, I think he's been a really big difference maker for them. Logan Stankoven as well played a big factor in that game one. win for Carolina against New Jersey. So they've been built for the playoffs. I think they've played some really good hockey, and I think for Carolina, like they're a very good defensive team. They're going to shut you down defensively. I don't think they gave New Jersey all that much. And Freddie Anderson was good in the games that he played. And ultimately, at the end of the day, he led them to, let's say, a victory against the New Jersey Devils. And I think coming into this series against Washington, I think it's going to be a lot tighter than people might, let's say, make it out to be. As for the Caps, I mean, look, like there's some question marks around the Washington Capitals for sure, right? I think the way they came out against the Canadiens and how much the Canadiens, let's say, pushed the Capitals is definitely something to take into consideration. The other thing, though, that I will say is, they really, really are a very good team 5-on-5. I think they play a really good style 5-on-5. I think they're very well coached. I think Carberry is one of the best coaches in the NHL, right? The reason why he got nominated for the Jack Adams, like he showed his true colors in these playoffs, showing just how good he is, right? The physicality that the Capitals have. They're a big team, right? They play physical. They're not afraid to get in your face. We saw some big hits from Ovechkin. We saw some big hits from Tom Wilson, right? As you mentioned, Ryan Leonard was a big factor in this series as well. Nick Dowd is another one that I'll talk about. So I think there was some good and some bad. I think I do agree. Logan Thompson was the MVP for the Capitals. I think he kept them in every single game, and I think he had to make some big saves to fend off the Montreal Canadiens. I'll also give a lot of credit to a guy like Dylan Strome, because I think Dylan Strome had a really good series. He finished with 9 points in 5 games, 2 goals, 7 assists. He's just a really smart player, and I think he really helped the Capitals on the offensive side of the puck. And look, Alex Ovechkin scored big goals in big moments. 4 goals in 5 games, including 2 in game 1 in the OT winner. Like, this is a team that is able to get their big guys producing at the right moment. And I think for Washington and Carolina, what it's going to come down to is ultimately depth at the end of the day, right? Is which team is going to be able to get that depth goal scoring. And what's interesting about the Washington Capitals, and one of the biggest factors as well, was they didn't have Protas for pretty much the entire series. They only had Protas back for game 5, and he's now officially back. He's listed on the 4th line here. I'm assuming over time he's going to gradually move up the lineup. But he was a big factor that they had lost in the series, as well as Faravari, who isn't expected back. So the thing for the Capitals and also for Carolina is these are two teams that are really well coached, really well balanced, can play really good 5-on-5. I think the big factor for these two teams is going to be penalty kill and power play, right? And obviously, if you look and if you take into consideration, both teams played really good, on their special teams. But Carolina did really well on the power play. Washington did okay on the power play. I mean, 23.1% compared to 31.6%. I know it's only one round, but you have to take it into consideration. However, Carolina's PK was 100% in round 1. The Washington Capitals were at 66.7%, right? Which is a big factor. And that, to me, I think is what's going to make the difference. As we talk about Logan Thompson and Freddie Anderson, and I think both goaltenders showcased just how good they were in round 1. Logan Thompson continues his phenomenal season of just being a really good, solid goaltender who's able to steal games for the Capitals, and that's exactly what he's done. But I think the Capitals are going to have to fix their penalty kill, and they're going to have to be really strong on the penalty kill, and they're going to have to be really good on the PK. And if they're able to do that, and they're able to, get their special teams going in round 2, I think they can, fend off the Carolina Hurricanes. But it's going to be tough, man. Carolina is a really good home team. They play really well at home. They're very well structured. They're a defensive team. So it might be another, let's say, boring series in the sense where it might not be the most entertaining, but these two teams play each other really hard even during the regular season. So I think it could be fun to watch. In terms of like what I see for this series, honestly, it's hard to call this one. And the reason it's hard to call this one is because I do think the two teams are evenly matched. I actually think it's a perfect matchup. And I think it's hard to pick a winner here because we've seen in the past, like Carolina not being able to get over the hump. And I think we've had this conversation multiple times about how Carolina needs to get over the hump eventually and how it's their year to win a cup, right? And I think this could be their year to win a cup. But I'm going to be honest. I just get the impression that with how good Logan Thompson has been, and with the fact that the Capitals are off to this really interesting run, I think the Capitals will edge out the Hurricanes.
This is where
That's
I disagree.
that's my personal opinion. And listen, look, I didn't watch. I watched, you know, I watched game 2 and game 3 of the Hurricanes. I didn't really get to watch. I didn't get the chance to watch the entire series, so it's hard for me to base and give my opinion on the Hurricanes because I only really watched 2 full games, and like a lot of my analysis is coming from game 2 and game 3, and a little bit of like game 4. Whereas the Capitals, I watched every minute of that series, so it's a little bit different when you look at the, let's say, scouting analysis and whatever. But I can tell you that I like what the Capitals are doing. I think Ovechkin is on a mission. I think the team itself is on a mission, and I think that with how well Logan Thompson has played, how well Logan Thompson played in round 1, if he continues that in round 2, it's going to be very, very hard to beat him. So
I say the reason why the Washington Capitals won, like I said before, is because of their weight, their aggressiveness, right? How they were able to dominate Montreal physically. They're a young, smaller team, inexperienced, right? And also, obviously, Logan Thompson dominating in terms of the
right,
goaltending matchup. But they also capitalized on an inexperienced team's mistakes. Washington is supposed to be completely dominating Montreal, right? And Montreal, you could say it's heart, you could say it's upcoming talent, they have a bright future, whatever. But Montreal had one of the best penalty kills in the playoffs. They had one of the best power plays in the playoffs. So does Carolina, but Carolina is heavier and they're more experienced. So they have the edge on the Washington Capitals right here because that's all Montreal was missing to beat the Washington Capitals. The games were very close. It was a game of of mistakes that were basically had that would cost the Montreal Canadiens. And I'm not trying to basically justify Montreal's loss or whatever and saying that the Washington Capitals didn't deserve it. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that's what ultimately led to Washington winning. And I know Protas is back, and that's great, and that's definitely going to be an X factor for Washington because he's so good 5v5. But when looking at how Carolina performs in the playoffs, this is a team that always goes to the Eastern Conference Finals and loses. So we know that they have to get over the hump this year and pass the Eastern Conference Final. But they're a very good first and second round team, and their depth has shown over and over again that they're able to get the job done. You have Jackson Blake who's doing well, Taylor Hall, Logan Stankoven. These are 3 guys that weren't part of the team last year, and 2 of them were added at the deadline, and they're producing. You have Jacob Slavin, who's usually known as a defensive defenseman and one of the probably best defensive defensemen in the league, and he's showing some offensive upside. That solo effort to score the top shelf goal versus New Jersey on Markstrom, that was fantastic. No one would have expected that from him. Like, they have a lot of depth. The only thing that scares me here is Kochetkov. If Anderson is not 100% ready to play, that will break this series for the Carolina Hurricanes, and that's where Washington wins. But if Anderson is playing versus Thompson, then it's a very close series. But I have to give the edge to the Carolina Hurricanes because based off what I saw in the first round, that is what Washington was lacking in terms of having a closer opponent to give them a true run for their money.
the the only the only thing that I'll say for that, and I agree to some extent, the only thing that I'll say to that is you talked about how Washington needed to do a better job against the Canadiens. And I agree. I agree. I don't think they played very well. I think they were I think Thompson had to be very much relied upon in that series. I agree with that. But let's also take into consideration that Carolina went to, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, and Chris, you can pull up the stats. I believe that the Carolina Hurricanes didn't really do that great against the New Jersey Devils either. And the reason I'm going to say that, and I know they won in 5, I understand, I've seen that, But like apart from let's say game 1 and game 2, I thought game 3, game 4 and game 5, I don't necessarily think they were that great. And the reason I'm going to say, I know game 4 they won 5-2, which is ironically the same result that the Caps got in game 4, but I think I think the problem with Carolina was I think they handled their business against New Jersey. I thought they were the better team. I also will let's also take into consideration New Jersey didn't have any of their star power apart from Jesper Bratt and Timo Meyer, and Nico Hischier, right?
All they were
Like
missing was Jack Hughes
they were missing Jack Hughes, they were
and Luke
missing
Hughes on the back
Brandon
end.
Dillon and Luke Hughes, and
Okay, but Dylan, come
that
on.
plays a role. And the reason it plays a role is because you're playing a team that was depleted. You're playing a team that didn't have their full lineup. And listen, yes, Carolina got the job done. So did Washington. But I think that Washington, it was a tough series. And the reason I'm going to tell you it was a tough series is because I don't necessarily think Washington were the favorites going into it against Montreal. And I know you're going to have this conversation of, oh, they were the 1 seed, Habs were the 8 seed, Habs didn't deserve to be there. Fine. But a lot of people, and I know that a lot of them weren't just Habs fans either, a lot of people thought Montreal could pull it off. And the reason they thought Montreal could pull it off is because the way things were looking with Logan Thompson maybe missing game 1, and with just the fact that the Caps had a really bad end to the season, and with how Montreal was playing and with how they were coached and with how much effort and let's say resiliency they had on that team, it felt like Montreal was able to beat Washington. And let's be real, Montreal gave Washington a really good run for their money, but Washington also wasn't at their best, in my opinion. And I think that you have to take that into consideration. Is we can look at the series between Washington and Montreal and say to ourselves, Washington should have done better against Montreal. And that's a fair argument. But you could also turn around and say Washington didn't play at their best, still got it done. And if they can improve on the play that they had against Montreal in the second round, they're going to be in a much better position. Because I think there's a lot more to the Capitals. I think what they've shown so far isn't, let's say, appealing, but there's a lot there. Washington was a successful team in the regular season for a reason. They were well coached for a reason. You know, they had some great success this season, and I think you're going to see that. Like you mentioned, Pierre-Luc Dubois, I think they're going to need more from him, right? But everything else, like let's pull up the stats. McMichael 3 goals, Ovechkin 2 goals, Tom Wilson Ovechkin 4 goals. McMichael 3 goals, Tom Wilson 2 goals. All these guys play in the
Yeah,
top 6.
Michael was very good this
Right?
series.
Ovillier had a really good series. Brandon Duhaime had a really good series. Right? Jacob Chikrin had a really good series. Right? They're gonna need more from guys like John Carlson. They're gonna need more from guys like Pierre-Luc Dubois. I agree with that. They're also getting Protas back, who I think is going to be a big help for them. And right, they're also going to need a little bit more depth scoring. But besides that, I think Washington, if they can improve a little bit on their play in the second round and maybe be a little bit better prepared against Carolina and they get the same goaltending, I don't see how the Hurricanes beat them, because I think on paper, the Capitals probably, at least offensively, are better than Carolina. Defensively, I think Carolina's better. Goaltending,
But this is another thing. Carolina under the Brendan Moore system. I know a lot of people questioning him and not a big fan of him. Plays a boring style of hockey, but he plays one of the best defensive structures in the league. And this is why Carolina, even in the regular season, they had either the best or one of the best penalty kills in the league, where they were so good that they were even scoring goals shorthanded, right?
yeah,
And their defense, I know it's not the flashiest, but they don't give you any breathing room. And you thought that we're losing Pesci, right? And losing other pieces as well on their decor that they were going to suffer. But you have Jalen Chatfield who stepped up. You know, he was always an underrated piece. You have, you also have Dmitry Orlov who's getting more playing time, showcasing more of his defensive capabilities as well. Because you know when they had those guys last year, Orlov was relegated to a third pairing role where he should be playing at least in the second pairing role, right? And
right.
um, you have Sean Walk, who is also very underrated as well. And then obviously Slavin being the best defensive defenseman in the league, and we saw what he was capable of doing in the Four Nations for Team USA, how important he was.
Right.
He steps up in the biggest moments, and I think that that's really going to control this series here. And Anderson being healthy is also going to be a factor. But another thing that's very important that we had mentioned in the first round a playoff matchup video is that they needed more from Svechnikov. And they
Right.
got exactly that.
Yeah.
They got more from Svechnikov. And that was key for them to win. And now that everyone is playing as expected, Martinuk, I don't know like what this guy does in preparation for the playoffs, but he's always a gamer in the playoffs. Like he's always doing something. Like every
Depth
single
guy,
time.
man.
Like Carolina shows that they have man better scoring depth at the third and fourth line positions is what I will say. But Nick Dowd, Brandon Duhane will tire you out and hit you and really close you out and really limit your options. The thing is that Protas, is he 100%? Because really he should be playing on a top line role. But the thing is also, if you're not going to put him there because Bavoli's been fantastic on the first line, Bavoli in the third or fourth line wasn't really doing anything. He was invisible before. So if you really want to get the most from all four lines, I guess the best thing you could do is move Protest to the third line and play with Eller and Manjapani, but then you're not getting the best from Protest 5v5, and we know how dangerous he is 5v5. So they have some questions internally, and we all know Pierre-Luc Dubois is also a ghost in the playoffs all the time. He
Right.
so um you know there's a I have more questions for Washington, and even watching them play, like this is not like me hating on Washington, but like I thought I was expecting more from their defense, and there was times where like they weren't as good defensively as they should have, and they let Montreal walk around them a couple of times. And I will say there was games where Montreal, yes, they didn't have a lot of shots, but it's not because Washington was entirely limiting Montreal shots. It's because Montreal was just not shooting. They were passing more. They're
But
overthinking, right?
but the thing
So
is like I also think I think it's hard this is why I think when you analyze the second round, I think it's really hard to make predictions, and I think it's all guessing games at the end of the day, right? And we can do analysis and really try to give our opinions, but like every team is so evenly matched that it's like you're going based on gut feeling more than anything, which is kind of the truth, but like it is what it is, right? Um, one of the things I will say though is everything resets to zero once you get into the playoffs. And the reason I say that is we can look at stuff that Montreal did. We could look at stuff that New Jersey did. We could look at stuff that like Ottawa, teams that got eliminated did as well in terms of like Tampa as well. But at the end of the day, like these teams can only focus on the series that's in front of them. And I think for both Carolina and Washington, we're at a point now where it's like we're gonna analyze. Let's analyze like their past series, but I also don't think that it really, let's say, determines how well the second round is going to go. Like the way I see it is, yeah, Washington wasn't great. I also don't. I wasn't overly impressed with Carolina. I wasn't surprised because I think everyone knew they were going to beat New Jersey. Like I don't think there was anyone that really had New Jersey over Carolina. I'd be shocked if there was. Um, but everyone knew Carolina was going to win. I think they're very well built for the playoffs. I think the big concern, like you said, is going to be in net. What, right? Is Freddie going to be 100% healthy? And I think, yeah, you could have the argument that like Carolina is going to be a really tough team to break down because they're a really good shutdown line. But I think from an offensive perspective, I think for goal scoring purposes, Washington could be a better team because I think they have more offensive star power. I think where this series could really be determined is on the back end, right? I think Carolina's got such a really good top six defensive core that it like doesn't even really matter, right, who they'll come up against offensively because they're so good defensively that it's just like it like basically beats like it stops anybody from being able to like compare it to anybody else because they're, I think in my opinion, they have the best decor in the league. So that's the other thing. But I'm just going based on gut feeling here. I like the way Washington plays. I like the way they're coached. I think to some extent there's a little bit of bias because I'm a big fan of Spencer Carberry, and maybe that's why as
Yeah,
well,
he's a great coach.
right?
He's really
So
respectful. I think he's one of the
all those
best
caps
coaches in the
contenders.
league. Well,
Yeah,
hence why he got nominated for the Jack Adams, and
right,
also St. Louis, who was his opponent in the first round, coach the Montreal Canadiens, is also a nominee, and both deserve it. And not only are they great coaches, guys that you really want to play for based off like clips that we've seen with with his players, based off how he's conducted himself as well, during interviews and also behind the bench, the decisions he makes. Same thing with St. Louis. Like these are probably the two most liked coaches in the league at the moment, apart from John Cooper. That's
right.
that's what I would say. But I mean, I think they're really well coached, and I think he's continuing to get better, and he's really helped Washington take the next level this year. And they're pretty much the same team on paper, apart from like Chikrin and Zubois, and a lot of guys really stepped up, and or guys bounced back like Ovi this year, right? But at the end of the day, I do believe that this will be very close. Goaltending is evenly matched, as you can see, based off save percentage and goals against. I think that's going to continue in the second round. The two hottest goalies in the league facing up against each other. Defense goes to Carolina.
Yeah,
Offense goes to Washington. So I have to say that,
but special teams Carolina's been better.
yeah,
That's the difference.
if
In my opinion,
Anderson
that'll be the
plays,
difference.
if Anderson plays, Washington loses in six. Carolina moves on to the Eastern Conference Final. If Kochetkov plays, Washington wins in six.
Does that okay? But let's say this. Let's say Kochetkov plays game one, but then they get Freddie back for game two. Are you still confident Carolina wins the series, or do you think if Kochetkov plays at any point that you think the Caps have a chance because that
I
they're gonna
think if
miss?
Kochetkov plays at any point, they're toast
Okay,
because this is a goalie that literally let in 3 goals in the first period versus New Jersey in Game Five, and they're lucky that he has a good team in front of them and they were able to come back and win that game.
right.
Because if he didn't, they were toast. They were going to lose that game. So, and I do believe that Kochetkov does make saves, but big saves, but he's very inconsistent. This is not a starting goalie. This is a guy that's a 1A, 1B, or I would say he's more of just a backup goalie. Like he had good stretches when Anderson was injured during the season, but you hear from Carolina fans all the time. Every time he plays when Anderson's injured, that you know
Can't seem to take the bull by
can't.
the horns.
Yeah, exactly. He can never surpass Anderson. Hence why Anderson just signed a 1-year contract today
Yeah,
because they're still not confident in Kochetkov. So with that being said, that's why Anderson is so important to this team. They can't let him go because Kochekhov's not ready, and if he's
right,
not ready, then they're gonna have to trade or sign a starting goaltender when Anderson's done.
right.
So look, if Anderson plays 6 games for Carolina, they go to the Eastern Conference Finals. If Kochekov plays, I'm convinced that because of his inconsistencies, he could at least pull off 2 wins, but Washington would win in six. But
Okay.
yeah, I
Well,
can't really give you a clear cut answer on who's going to win because we don't who we have yet to know who the starters are going to be. We know Anderson's practicing right now and he's in the starting net, but anything could change. We know how injury prone Anderson is. So
yeah.
yeah,
And also Logan Thompson, even though he came back against the Habs, he didn't look 100%. Like yes, he won and he played well, but he didn't look 100%. So I don't know how. I mean, I'm sure the rest will help him, but again, we don't really know how healthy the goalies are either.
yeah. So if Kochekov plays, I would say the guy that needs to wake up the most and be consistent has to be Kochetkov in terms of Carolina. I think even Jordan Stahl would be nice to get more from him and Kokanyemi. Hopefully his eye is healed and he's ready to go. Um, and then for Washington, I really don't have any complaints except for Dubois, I would say, and I would also say Carlson. Those are the two guys that need to wake up for Washington in round two, and hopefully Protas is able to move up in the lineup and dominate 5v5 like he has in the regular season. But
Yeah.
those are our
Um,
predictions, guys. Like we always say in every single prediction video, uh, Comment in the comment section below who wins, Carolina, Washington. Who were the MVPs in round one? Who do you think are going to be the X factors in this round? Um, how many games will it take for either team to win? And yeah, or if you have anything else apart from that to mention about this matchup series, please make sure to comment in the comment section below. Like this video, subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And yeah, we'll see you on the next episode of the Young Guns podcast. Thank you so much, guys, for watching.